Here's the music for you guys. Okay, we're live. Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Today we got a very special guest, Joshua Green. How's it going today?
Doing amazing, man. How you doing?
Doing pretty good, doing pretty good. There's not much new in Bitcoin Cash, so we don't have much to talk about. So,
No, I'm sure it'll be a boring episode.
yeah, pretty,
Maybe we'll watch some YouTube videos together or something.
yeah, pretty boring week. But yeah, so I know there's like a big controversy, discussion, whatever you want to call it at this point, around the new infrastructure funding plan uh, for Bitcoin Cash, and we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later. So, for the title of this video is about the Bitcoin Cash specification, and so let's just jump right into this. So, what the heck?
Yeah.
What the heck is a specification?
Yeah. No, I mean, a specification means a lot of different things to a lot of people. I think it might be more clear to really view it as as just documentation of the protocol itself. Specification kind of has like this authoritative, connotation to it, right? But the reality is, people who write the specification don't have any authority over really anybody. The only real authority that we have are miners and people running nodes and people developing the actual software that runs the network. And that's not controlled by like a W3C, consortium or anything like that. That's just what people want to do. So what the protocol spec sent out to do is really just take a first class effort at documenting what already exists, so that future developers kind of know what's going on without having to reverse engineer multiple implementations in different languages with different edge cases. So
Yeah, so even more layman's term, it's basically an outline of what all the technical details of Bitcoin Cash,
yeah,
right? Yeah, so
yeah, exactly.
I actually did have it pulled up here, so let's take a look at it. Let's take a look
Sure.
at it. So I'm in a BIP right now, so we'll go back to the top. It's reference.cache is the URL for this, but
There's two. Yeah.
you got two. What's the other one?
Bitcoin protocol.cache.
Oh,
And I can tell you what the difference is. It's the same content, it's just a different look and feel.
gotcha.
Different organization as well.
Gotcha. So, yeah, this is it so far. It's obviously not completely done yet. But who is all working on who is all working on this? Is it your team over at Bitcoin Verde, which we will talk about too?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it started off as a BIP, BIP from oh, there's the honk.
Hey, thanks for the honk.
Uh,
I had a honk noise. I think it's kind of quiet though. So
That's okay. But yeah, so it started off as a BUIP, right? So this is basically a way for Bitcoin Unlimited to use some of its funds to sponsor things that they feel are good for the ecosystem.
Mhm.
And Jonathan Silverblood originally actually proposed this BUIP. It was proposed, or it was, yeah, I think it was proposed like almost a year ago, and it was just to set some funding for who develops it, and we just kind of were approached as a group that would be willing to do it, and so most of this content is actually from Bitcoin Verde / Software Verde, and then we have some other contributions from what I'll call like the consortium or the consortium, and it's just other developers that I know pretty well, that you guys also know very well, and they contributed some content, and it's really meant to be a an effort across every node implementation, not just us.
Mhm.
But for the most part, it's us currently.
Gotcha. I mean, so yeah, I mean, there's some. You like have a section for blockchain, so it's like it can be very simple. Like, what is a blockchain? And then
Right.
it goes kind of. I mean, you can go deeper into network level validation rules, and then you get into like all the technicals of it. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of marketed towards like new devs, right? Like catch up on what's going on with Bitcoin Cash, right? If you're coming over from a different project or a different coin, just like see what the heck's going on, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And we actually have a whole section on who our audience is for this, as well as like a style guide and things like that. And one of the mentalities I had in my head is, this is meant for me like 2 years ago when I first started Bitcoin Verde. Like it's it's things I wish that were available, so I wouldn't have to go through the pain of reverse engineering a bunch of code.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of similar to like, I mean, when people say like to do movies or write a script, like it's just like, what would you? I guess my metaphor is kind of breaking down in my head now. It's like, what would you like to watch, right? Like, what would you like to do yourself? What are you interested in? And yeah, so like it's kind of a similar thing to you. Like, what would help you, right? And so, yeah,
Right.
Kelso in the chat said, right, Josh right now is piloting a plane over the Midwest.
Oh no.
Okay. Because your
It's probably my
headphones.
sound.
No, it's your headphone. It just looks like a
Oh,
pilot
gotcha.
headphone. Yeah. No, you're good. He's just messing with you.
Yeah,
Uh,
gotcha.
so yeah, you got some funding from BU from this, right?
Yeah,
To get
yeah.
this going. So, yeah, very very nice. And I was reading somewhere that Nchain actually like started to do this first.
Oh, yeah, 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 sure. So I mean, actually, to be perfectly honest, I hadn't even heard of that until I started the project. And then like people were like, oh, what about like I think it was actually a developer meeting. Someone brought up like, oh, Nchain failed and they tried to do these things. And I was like, oh, okay, I should probably like learn what the hell they did. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like there's been actually a lot of documentation efforts for this. I mean, like this isn't the first one. And there's I'm sure there's an XKCD about when a new, protocol comes out. It's the protocol to end all protocols, and now you just have yet another protocol. And so, I mean, like we tried to take some of the lessons that were learned from some of the previous attempts. And I mean, there's the existing documentation that I found the most useful a couple of years ago was the Bitcoin.it wiki. But that's made for Bitcoin. And that's actually okay. So if you go to the Bitcoin protocol.cash one, you'll actually
Sure.
see how this is meant to be a collaborative kind of effort. Um, but like the Bitcoin IT like wiki is specifically for Bitcoin, like, and therefore a lot of it has SegWit. Some of it's like not even relevant to Bitcoin Cash anymore. Some of it's just straight up wrong, even for Bitcoin. Um, but also like it's just one group. It's just one group of people doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And what we wanted to do here is kind of like make that more collaborative. So what we wanted to do is basically say this is the superset of what we think the protocol to be. So this isn't like this is how Bitcoin Verde does things and therefore it's the real spec. You know what I mean? Like it's legitimately supposed to just say everyone agrees that this is what we do. And we want developers. We want at least one developer from each group to contribute to this content. So that's what this consortium is supposed to be. We've had people from like ABC, BU, obviously Bitcoin Verde, BCHD, all actually contribute to some of the content that's here. And we want to keep that going forward. But that's why we put a lot of emphasis on the style guide and the layout. And the style guide is really intended to be like, this should be non-controversial. Everyone should be able to come here and collaborate and update things as we go. Right. And that's not something that really existed previously.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems it's kind of one of those things you like. Wait, this doesn't exist already. It's like it's kind of like a wiki, right? It's like, wait, why hasn't anybody done this yet? It's just like, well, nobody's done
right.
it. So,
right.
So yeah. So yeah, kind of going on. I mean, we can obviously come back to this, but yeah, Bitcoin Verde. So I was listening. The last time you were on a show was actually with our very own rest in peace. I mean, he's not dead, but he's out of crypto. Was Peter Ryan. We're not actually gonna watch this, but it's just kind of funny, and it's funny. The title of this is "How to Fund Open Source Dev." And we all know it happened in the last day or so, but we will get back to that. But yeah, you kind of just like went over Bitcoin Verde and here a little bit, and you kind of want to explain what Bitcoin Verde is. You're saying it's kind of like a hardcore, but it's a heavy node implementation, right? So
oh my god, yeah.
So like, what does that mean? How is it different? And
yeah, so I mean, like, when I wrote Bitcoin Verde, there was a lot of kind of goals involved. But what I mean by heavy client is like if you look at Bitcoin ABC, right, it only takes you could run it on kind of a potato. even with like the 32 megabyte limit, like you don't really need that much disk space. I think it's like 200 gigs or something along those lines. Bitcoin Verde currently takes like 780 gigs or something like that on your disk space. And it's a full indexing node. So like literally the entire blockchain is in a database. So I was actually talking with Mark Lundeberg last night, and I was like, if you ever want to know like how many opcodes are used or something like that, you can actually just like query the database through a SQL connection. So it's a very different take on a node. It's not necessarily you can't run it on like a potato. Mm-hmm. It's like actually meant for like a server. So from that standpoint, like that's what I mean by like a heavy node. It's not necessarily meant to be there's not supposed to be 1,000 nodes, but if you're running like a UTXO service, or if you're trying to do an SLP validation chain, like SLP validation on Bitcoin Verde was so easy to write because we have all that data there. Literally every transaction to ever exist is indexable, just like at all times. It's not even a special outside indexer. It's a part of the actual chain.
Nice. So are there any services like using it now, or are you trying to encourage more people to, or are you still writing? Where's kind of the status of the project?
No, sure. I mean, like it's a fully validating node. Literally the only rule that I don't know. Well, maybe not literally, but very close to like the only rule that it doesn't even follow is the SIGOPS count, and that's because we're redoing it in the next fork. So when I was asking about documentation for how do I implement the SIGOPS, counting stuff, Amari was basically like, don't even bother. We've been trying to like get rid of that system for years now, or at least a year now, and he's like, we want to propose a new system. So if I don't particularly care about getting that implemented right away, I could basically wait until we come up with a system that doesn't suck. So that's basically what we're waiting for the new hard fork. And then we should basically be like mining compliant. Like if you wanted to mine a block on Bitcoin Verde, it'd technically be doable. It currently is. It's all done. There's like Stratum. You can connect a miner to it. We've done it. But yeah, it's done. And then for as far as like services that use it, I mean, it's all like bitcoinverde.org, is all an open API. People can use it if they want. It's a block explorer inherently. I don't know how many people are using it. We used it for some business stuff, like that's independent of, like third parties, I guess is what I mean to say. So like all of our private blockchains that we implement for enterprises, like for the city of Dublin, that's actually like they're posting their private blockchains to Bitcoin Cash's network as kind of like checkpoints, so it keeps them honest. And that's usually when we kind of like prove to other enterprises that's getting on the blockchain, we usually just point it to Bitcoin Cash, the block explorer. Sorry, bitcoinverde.org.
Gotcha. Yeah, so. I was going to kind of transition into that now that you say it. So Dublin, Ohio, you guys proposed the SLP token. I know you had a big talk about it back in Australia, which I was at. Unfortunately, I didn't. I mean, I watched all the talks after, but I wasn't in there. But yeah, how is the status of that SLP? I know it was like still to be announced. Do you want to kind of go over what it does again, and then the status of that?
Yeah, sure. So like the Dublin digital identity is meant to be just kind of like Dublin's acting as a notary, and this is for Dublin, Ohio, not like Dublin, Ireland. So it's smaller in that sense. But like they're acting as a notary for your PII. So basically, if you wanted to share your information with somebody, you have basically an SECP 256K1 signed signature, which is the same signature we use for Bitcoin, from the city of Dublin saying that this PII is accurate, and then you as a constituent or a user have control over who has access to that. So if someone like a third party, like like your energy provider or something like that, wants to know what your address is or what your social security number is or something like that, you can granularly say yes or no. And what they are doing is behind the scenes they have this private blockchain to basically log all of these requests, so that if I come to Dublin and say, hey, you gave out my my personally identifiable information and I didn't tell you can do that, there's a problem with that. Dublin can have the accountability to say, okay, well, hang on, here's a signed message that you signed like a year and a half ago saying that you authorize this PII share to this public key. It's been in our private blockchain. It has this much work done on it. Plus, we've done checkpoints to a blockchain that we don't control, aka Bitcoin Cash. Like we didn't tamper with this. There's no way that we could have forged this data. So that's like their identity portion of things. But their SLP token is meant to be just a token of value to inspire like a close-knit community. So the token's called Dubs for Dublin. It doesn't exist. It's been like basically Dublin. I mean, it will. It just hasn't. They haven't done the official like public go live yet. So we've done a couple of private betas. We've done a public beta, and now we're basically waiting for Dublin to give us the go ahead to publish the actual like final token. I don't have a timeline on it because it's completely up to them. I would assume like any time now because it's all done and it's on their servers and everything. So we're just waiting for literally a call from them to say do it. But it's meant to just, they have like festivals in Dublin, like any place does, but imagine recycling, and if you recycle enough, you'll get some Dublin points or some dubs, and if you have 100 dubs, then maybe you get priority parking or a free beer or something like that at the Dublin Irish Festival. So it's just a way for them to kind of like give back to the community for being a good citizen.
Yeah, it's like airline points, but for cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was like reading that. I was like, for city events, redeem for city branded swag discounts. But yeah, I mean, why not, right?
Yeah, I mean, they saw it as just a way to kind of bolster their community. If you ever go to the city, it's actually really cool. They're very focused around kind of living within their own ecosystem.
Yeah, how big is it? What's the population?
Oh man, I don't know. I want to Google it. I don't want to give a wrong number.
All right, I got you.
Thanks, man.
All right.
It's not micro, but it's not like it's not like the city of capital. It's not the city capital size or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, 50,000. That's bigger than the city I grew up in. Yeah. So, yeah, that'd be. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I can't wait to like see it actually happen. See if people actually use it for perks and all that. It's kind of funny. I know we always like try to get incentives for people to use crypto in real life, right? Like, how do we get this onboarded or whatever? And I don't know if this is a thing in other states. I've just been here for a while, but in Georgia, if you use cash to buy gas, you get like 10 cents off like everywhere. And I realized I like don't even do that. Like I just use my credit card because it's convenient. But like if there's a Wells Fargo or whatever bank ATM next door of mine as well, and it's 10 cents a gallon, so it's really only like $1.50. So like, is it worth it? But yeah, it's the whole like incentive thing. Like what's the incentive? Is it strong enough of an incentive, right?
I think Dublin was a great city to do it in, though, to be perfectly honest, because their community is kind of fanatical about their own stuff. So like we did last Thursday, we had this opportunity to talk to the public, and a very kind of like, anyone that was a citizen can come. And we were expecting this to be kind of like this, trial by fire kind of like crucifixion in some ways, of being like, you're sharing my data, we're not comfortable with this, like. And the reality is everyone was like, this is super cool, can we start using this right now? And especially the point stuff, because like they already have tokens at the Dublin Irish Festival. Like you literally don't spend cash at the festival. You
nice.
Walk in and you buy tokens, and they're physical tokens.
Yeah.
So they were already like, oh, okay, sure, let's just use it on my phone. I don't know why I'd carry around a change full of plastic circles anyway.
Right.
I think that those are the kinds of things that like it's a good community, just kind of like Townsville, Australia is like a very good community for accepting BCH. Like they were just on it for whatever reason. But there are plenty of cities that are in Ohio that I'm sure are going to be a little bit more old school and not necessarily super excited to use some crazy tech or something.
Not as savvy. Yeah, that makes sense. So if there's like already physical tokens, everybody, I mean, it's 2020, everybody's doing everything on their phone anyway, so might as well.
Yeah.
It's maybe that'll come to. The one problem I always see, and I mean we've kind of been starting to solve it, is like, say you have you have beer tickets, right? So instead of beer tickets, you have beer tokens, and then all of a sudden your phone's
Yeah.
dead because you're drunk and don't give a shit.
Yeah, right.
So, all my beer tokens. but
I can't get drunk anymore. Yeah.
just put it on the
Yeah.
Sato chip. Is that what it's called now? The thing Tobias is making. Put it on your little token credit card, and then it'll be all right.
No, that's actually a thing, right? Like Tobias has that the cool like SECP 256.1 K1 like signature stuff on his card.
Yeah.
Like that's actually something that we talked about using in Dublin too, for just like, maybe I don't want to carry my phone all the time when I'm going to the rec center, So if I want to just put it on a card, in theory you can. There's obviously like drawbacks for that, but it's doable.
Right.
It's cool.
Yeah, somebody in Bitface said in chat, I'm an hour from Dublin. How did I not know about this stuff?
I mean, I live in Columbus, so I'm happy to talk about it all day long. And yeah, like I said, as soon as it goes live, like live, it'll probably be like more local headlines. We also have another municipality that's doing the same thing. That's like really nearby. So depending on which direction you're from Dublin, maybe it's you.
Nice. Yeah, and then the whole private blockchain is interesting. So, but they like still like checkpoint into Bitcoin Cash. So yeah, that's just like for identity addresses type things. So did you say that was like already working, or they're still kind of waiting? That's already going.
It's already going. Yeah. So that actually was like the last talk I did. We talked about kind of like funding development, right? And the way that we've been doing things is we work with enterprises for blockchain stuff, and sometimes that involves BCH, right? So we, as a business, like Software Verde versus Bitcoin Verde, have an incentivization to keep Bitcoin Verde up to date because it's kind of our interface into the Bitcoin Cash world, right? And our private blockchain is literally a fork of Bitcoin Verde. So we took all of the networking, all of the kind of verification, relaying, those kinds of things, forked it for a private network component, and then forked it for like document storage and things. And then we just use the same libraries to actually publish the block hashes to Bitcoin Cash. So we actually like use the Bitcoin Verde wallet. Like the private blockchain nodes have their own little wallet, and they just submit transactions. And same thing when we came to like implementing the Dublin's SLP token. Like, a server somewhere has access to issue you SLP tokens, and like for when you sign up. And actually, when you sign up for the Dublin identity, you also get like 10 cents worth of Bitcoin Cash so that you can fund your SLP transactions.
Right.
So,
hey,
like,
I mean, you guys,
that's all using Bitcoin Verde code.
Right. Hey, maybe the post office spec that Vin put out, maybe you could kind of fund that within the Dublin government or whoever's running the token. So
I mean, that's a real possibility. Like the way that we're funding things now for the SLP tokens isn't perfect, and doesn't like scale for forever. But the post service kind of does, and it's also a really good name because it's kind of like an analogy that people get.
Right.
So, yeah, it could definitely be a real thing. It's just going to be a function of demand.
Right. Yeah. For anybody that's not aware, Vin put out this proposal. I think there's one already going on Spice, but I've never used it. But basically, you set up a post office. So the city of Dublin, for example, would set up a post office for dubs, and whenever somebody didn't have Bitcoin Cash, but they had dubs, they could send like 10 dubs to somebody else and then 0.001 dubs to the post office, and the post office would essentially exchange the dubs for BCH and use that as the transaction fee towards the miner. So yeah, I mean, that could definitely make it scalable, especially if it's being used for city promotion. A better word. So funding.
Sure. Right. Yeah, that's a thing.
So yeah, before we go on to this subject, because I'm sure we can talk about this for a while, is there anything else you want to kind of say about the Bitcoin Cash Protocol spec, city of Dublin?
Real quick about the spec, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that's important is that we have people contributing. It's not meant to just be Software Verde writing ad nauseum. We're happy to keep doing it, but the reality is we want more participation from the other node implementations, and we've seen that. And that's why this this version that you're looking at, the Bitcoin protocol.cache, that is it's like a wiki that is backed by markdown files. So if you have an account, you can actually like start editing live on the webpage, and then it creates commits for you. It's a way to kind of prevent the problem with wikis where some jerk basically just writes some nonsense, and then we have to figure out how to undo it. With this kind of, it's all committed through Git, and you can kind of track who wrote what, and you can revert stuff and not allow it, and it's clean from that standpoint. But if you want to contribute to the Bitcoin Cache or Bitcoin Protocol Cache spec, you can either use, Git specifically, BU and Coin Verde, and hopefully every other node implementation has a clone of it. You can contribute that way and then make pull requests, or you can actually use this website and use the Markdown editor. That's a part of the website. So happy to start distributing access and doing those things. You can find that you can find me on like the Bitcoin Verde Telegram or on Twitter or whatever you need. And if you're a developer or knowledgeable about the Bitcoin protocol, then I encourage you to participate.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you got a lot of I mean, you have like all the outline here. Then of course you got to go through and explain it all. Is this kind of the outline you're going to go with, or is there going to be more to this?
I mean, it's democratic, right? Like, we don't necessarily control anything other than the website. It's actually designed to be distributed for the power, right? Like, Bitcoin Verde owns the domain, but BCHD runs the server, and we're looking for like a non-developing entity to host like the main repo, so like a bitcoin.com or something like that, just to kind of keep things egalitarian. And yeah, so I mean, people are allowed to make whatever commits or not commits they want, and check out the version, like the protocol version page. It's probably the most fleshed out one, but that's where it's going to get into like how nodes do things differently, and it's the handshake, not the acknowledge, but the other one. That one that we spent the most time on because it was the most interesting one, because basically every node does something differently on that particular page.
Which one is it? Project history?
No. It's the handshake version.
And okay,
yeah, like 2 under ping.
It's so strange you can't see my mouse. Anyways, okay.
But like that one at the end like talks about like how different nodes handle different things differently. But the specification, if you want to call it that, is what everybody agrees on. And then if somebody wants to do something differently, they can at the bottom. So like whether or not you ban people for having extra content after a certain field or whatever behavior you happen to have. But yeah, there's also a dark mode if you prefer dark mode.
Oh,
it's like the little circle in the bottom right.
Of course I prefer dark mode. Oof.
So there's that.
It's like the number one feature everybody's putting into websites these days.
we did like a really big project for a large car manufacturer, and the only complaint we worked on this project for like 6 months, and then the only complaint we got from the actual people using it, which were a bunch of developers, were like, it doesn't have a dark mode. So like we're just like, okay, yeah, we'll make one. Sure, it takes us a couple of days. It's fine. But yeah, dark. So we just kind of do dark modes now by default.
Nice.
But yeah, so I mean, if you wanna collaborate on it with us, I definitely encourage it. And there's really a lot to talk about, but I know that we should also probably talk about the elephant. So I'm happy to do that.
The elephant. Infrastructure funding plan for Bitcoin Cash.
Cue like dramatic music or something.
I wish I had something.
Yeah.
Assistant, come on, keep it up.
I want some explosions and like fire and.
Yeah, I think I got fire somewhere. Nope, not here. I do have this one though. It's a little honker guy. Oh, he's not even on here. Never mind. Nothing's working. Okay, but
okay.
But anyways, if you haven't heard of this and you're in the chat right now, well, welcome to Bitcoin Cash, I guess. I don't know how you got here.
It's never a dull moment, like it's never a dull moment. Like I was actually like so happy for like one of the last developer meetings. I'm like, oh, this hard fork is going to be so easy. Like no one's pissed off at one another. Like it's going to be so nice and straightforward. And then yesterday, someone drops a big nuke bomb on the whole like peace and like calm that's happening, and now we have this. So
Hey, it's gonna be great for my live stream numbers during the during the
exactly right. It's like it's like the whole impeachment trial. Everyone's happy, or no one's happy except for the news.
Yeah, exactly.
So
basically. So yeah, let's try and recap this here. So basically, four mining pools. I think they're at the bottom here. Jihang Zuhur BTC.top, Jihan Wu of Antpool and BTC.com, Hypo Yang of Via PTC, and Roger Ver of Bitcoin.com. They all are agreeing to fund 12.5% of the block reward of every block on Bitcoin Cash to give it to infrastructure development is what they're saying. But where it's going is actually some Hong Kong company they are creating themselves. We'll come back to all of this, but and then if a block doesn't comply with this 12.5%, they're going to orphan them, and so yeah, that's it. And so basically, I think Amaury is going to code this into Bitcoin ABC as like a basic consensus rule. But even if it's not a consensus rule, if you orphan all the blocks that don't agree, it's essentially a consensus rule, right? So yeah, what were your first thoughts when this came up? I'll just start there.
Oh yeah. I mean, so for the record, I don't know how I feel yet. It's a very complicated issue. Yes. Like it really, really, really is. But to kind of trace through my initial thoughts, I was like, oh, cool. Like funding. Like we could all use funding. That's for sure. And I got like maybe like 3/4 of the way through the article. I'm like, okay, this seems like reasonable. It seemed like the way that they propose it is it's supposed to be like voluntary to an extent, but then you find out that it's really not, right. Or at least that it's more complicated. And then we talk about like the orphaning of things, and then we talk about the actual like complication of how does this actually get rolled out? Because if you think about how mining actually happens, right? Choosing the head branch that you are mining on is kind of controlled by the node in some senses. It basically recommends a get block template, right? You're like, oh, give me the next block, and then the Stratum protocol takes that template, and then they replace the Coinbase, and they send the work out to their ASIC miners, and then one of the ASIC miners finds an appropriate hash. So choosing to orphan things based on some rule that doesn't really exist, is that node change or is it not? It doesn't have to be, and that's actually what Amaury's article says. Is in theory, at a bare minimum, like if none of the nodes were to cooperate, they would still be able to do this. This is kind of like the miners choosing to, which fork to mine off of. They always have that ability. So from that standpoint, if it's not if it's not an actual node rule, then is it a soft fork, or is it just kind of like a 51% attack, or is it something not? And do we really even have a way to talk about this? Like maybe this is just a new concept that we have to kind of consider. Maybe it's not a soft fork, maybe it's not a hard fork, maybe it's not a 51%, like maybe it's just a thing. And yeah, so I don't know. I was very conflicted. I'm still very conflicted. There's a lot of cool things here, and I think the intent seems really good. I think there's a lot of details that need to be fleshed out and announced still, because I have opinions about whether or not there should be a soft fork or a hard fork or something that nodes like follow, or if it's not. And those kind of details really can change my opinion pretty drastically. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, the orphaning, like you said, is just. I mean, the language is reminiscent of the BSV fork, but the difference this time it's not. It's more of a group of miners rather than like one central entity this time. So it's. I mean, I think I had a very succinct way of saying it. It's the miners throwing the big dick on the table. Finally, right?
Yeah.
because you had like the UASF, which was like the nodes matter, and we're not going to follow your chain if we don't like your rules. But in reality, if the miners mine the longest chain, then that's the new chain. So yeah, it's the orphaning. Here's the two most controversial parts, right? Is this Hong Kong corporation has been set up to legally accept and disperse funds. The funds would be used to pay for development and contributions to full node implementations, as well as other critical infrastructure. And so, who is this Hong Kong corporation, right? I mean, we assume it's the four people that signed it, but again, like, why have this middleman? I saw a good suggestion to improve. Maybe we like get a list of authenticated addresses of the different node implementations. So we have a Bitcoin ABC, a BU, BCHD, Bitcoin Verde, anybody, right. And then the individual miners can decide themselves which address they want to send this 12.5% to. And I think that'd be a much better, easier way to do it. I mean, the whole point of Bitcoin, right, is to like get rid of the middleman. So
yeah.
But now we have a middleman. So in a corporation the whole Bitcoin.com fundraiser, where the funds were like, I don't know exactly what happened, but they were essentially like stuck for a while because people couldn't legally accept it because of some reason with the company holding the funds. I don't know if you know more about that, but it just is a central point of failure, right? And so,
yeah. That's actually, I think, why it's a Hong Kong corporation. Is I think that was, some organizations, and I don't know which ones, but I hypothesize it's either ABC or BU. The words were basically they can't accept large anonymous donations, and therefore this middleman makes it not anonymous, right? It's a corporation that's donating to them from Hong Kong. That's still not good, right? Like there's still lots of problems with how that can be run. And there are a lot of opinions on what that should look like. And I also acknowledge that it's complicated. Like the reality is it's complicated. So like Bitcoin Verde, right? Like you can throw money at us all day. Like we don't care who you are. Like BCHD, I'm pretty sure you can do the same thing. Like Flowy the Hub, like you can just throw money at us. We don't care. Because we're not structured as like an organization. But with BU and ABC, I think they have different, circumstances. Now, why everyone's who would potentially be receiving funds need to go through the corporation when not everybody needs to do it, I don't know. Like maybe that's up for debate. Maybe we do have a whitelist of addresses, and then the people who can't receive anonymous donations, they have it proxied through their own corporation, whether it be in Hong Kong or Tibet, like who cares? And that's up to them. And that's just who they, designate as their, weird recipient. That could make sense. It also kind of opens up the transparency, right? Like who gets what is now kind of controlled by something that makes more sense instead of this corporation that, Amari's like suggesting that we have kind of like a consortium there between the miners and the developers, and they can kind of collaborate on who gets funding and when. But I mean, debating between the developing, organizations is already pretty complicated. Just look at the rifts between BU and ABC. Like, I don't know. I feel like that could be a really complicated mess. But maybe that's what we need. I don't know. Like I think they need to come up with some more concrete details about how this is going to work. And I think we just kind of keep an open mind and ultimately realize that there are some things we can control and there are some things that we can't. And as a node developer, we can control what code we write. But we also can't control how miners like apply their hashing power. Right. That's the reality. So.
Yeah, it's like this whole thing is miners choose, right? And miners are the executive power, as some people like to say, of Bitcoin. They mine the chain. And so it's like, why not give them the power to decide where their individual coins go to? I know there was some of the criticisms against, people say it's a tax. And that's like a very triggering word for the Bitcoin Cash crowd because, most of us are libertarians and taxation is theft and yada, yada, yada. So Amari is supportive of this, and he was very supportive of this actually, and so his main reasoning is that it aligns the incentives of miners and developers. But he says about the taxing, it's not a tax because a tax is a compulsory contribution to state revenue, and it's is it a compulsory contribution? Yeah, and he basically says miners can choose to mine on the block or not, and so all their arguments was that taxes are taxes because they are procured at the threat of violence or getting thrown into jail, right? And this is, if you don't want to pay, just go to another chain, right?
I mean, I totally respect Amari, and I definitely don't think people should call it a tax because only because a tax is a emotional argument, right? You call it a tax because you're appealing to emotion, not because you're appealing to reason. So whether or not it's analogous to a tax, I honestly don't care. You're trying to make somebody upset by calling it that. I'm more interested in the actual facts and effects. That being said, I mean, yeah, it's not. You're not free to choose. It is compulsory. That's the way that it's set up. Like if you are threatening people that you're going to orphan their chain, that makes it not optional. Like that is the definition. Like, sure, you have the option to be the minority chain and then have all of your work be wasted because you're not listed on an exchange and therefore can't get your electrical expenses reimbursed. But that's not a real option. So to pretend that it is disingenuous. But you're free to kill somebody, but you're also going to be put in jail, right?
Yeah,
it's not really an option. But yeah, calling it a tax is just like, who the hell cares? Like I you're saying that to piss somebody off.
Yeah.
Actually talk about the real facts behind it and stop calling it like silly labels. So
I got one. I was trying to think of other words people have been using. One was extortion. one was gosh, there's a bunch of different words. People are like, well, it's not a tax, it's extortion. But there are other nicer ones. A donation, I guess. Compulsory donation.
Right.
And so
you can spin it however you want.
Right. Too high tax on BCH. But yeah, so people are calling this like a cartel of miners, right? And I would argue Bitcoin mining kind of already is a cartel. Cartel by definition is competitor. I mean, my definition. I need to Google it to get the proper definition. But a cartel is a bunch of competitors coming together to work together towards a common good that they couldn't get if they were all actually competitors. And if somebody cheats or lies or whatever, they can not be part of the cartel.
It's collusion,
anymore.
Right.
And so
it's collusion. But go ahead.
No, yeah, that was pretty much it. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, and that's not necessarily. I mean, and you're right. We are kind of already in that section, and even Satoshi kind of talks about how it's just going to become a bunch of big miners just due to how markets work with efficiency, and that's not necessarily the worst thing, but we do need to make it clear like what the users want, because in theory the miners should be like following what the users want, because if the users all agree that this is a bad idea, then their coin's not going to be worth anything. So there is a bit of balance of power. Calling it a cartel, I mean, sure, it is. It is. And I think even Amari kind of says, yeah, sure, it is. And then it becomes a matter of like, do they actually have enough? Like, is it what the miners want as a whole? Like, we have a good chunk of them together, but is it everybody? And I think that opinion needs to be heard. I think we need to have the other mining pools call out how they feel and what they want, and whether or not they're on board with the concept at all, or if they need more details to figure that out too.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy because I mean these mining pools have a lot of hash, but I think it was like 30 exahash they had total, but the total hash on BCH right now is like 3 exahash, and so it's like they have all this hash, but Bitcoin Cash is a minority chain, so it's like how much hash are they going to waste to defend the chain, right? I mean, we saw in the hash war with SV that Roger just put out the numbers the other day. He spent $1 million defending the chain, right? And so like how much
Yeah.
money are they willing to waste defending the chain when that money could have just instead gone right to the developers, right? So it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, the kind of another controversial part about this article was that I'm just gonna read it. The chief architect of the Chinese reform and open up policy, Deng Xiaoping, has three famous insights: cat philosophy, river philosophy, and non-debate theory. First of all, this is like a communist dictator, essentially. So not good optics to start with. But cat philosophy, no matter white cat or black cat, a cat that catches rats is a good cat. So basically, the ends justify the means.
Justify the means. Yeah.
I suppose. River philosophy, to cross the river by touching stones. I think that one's a little bit lost in translation, but this is one. Non-debate theory. Non-debate theory is my invention. Non-debate is to gain time to work hard. When you debate, everything becomes more complicated and it wastes time. Nothing can be done. Don't debate and just try. Be brave and experiment. And so this is where the bad optics really come in, right? It's just because this article pretty much came out of nowhere. I know there was talk about there being a way for miners to donate to devs before, but this whole proposal itself came out of absolutely nowhere. And then and then you have something like this that's like non-debate theory, and so it's basically like trying to shove it in Bitcoin Cash's miner space. And again, it's just like all the theory of it is just so strange because it is a minority chain, and so another. I mean, do you have anything to say about like how it was released and the optics, and like usually when something drops for Bitcoin Cash, like I'll try and defend it or something on Twitter, whatever.
Sure.
If I have time, I'll do it. But like this, I was just like, yeah, that's too much.
Yeah, no, I mean they definitely made it hard, right? They made the PR of this very difficult, and that matters a bit. It's not everything, but it does matter a bit. And this reminds me a bit of kind of like the original SegWit 2x debate, right? Like Bitcoin is complicated because it's complicated technology. Bitcoin is complicated because it's a completely different economic model, and it kind of is disregarding governments and working across governments and doing lots of weird things that have never been done before. And then it's also really complicated because we have different cultures from different countries with different mentalities, all working on the same thing.
I'm gonna stop right here. My internet just kind of bounced out. Dropping frames.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're back. I was dropping frames there, but yeah, go ahead, pick up from Bitcoin is complicated.
Yeah, Bitcoin. I mean, like, yeah. So I don't know when the last thing that was said, but like, we're also dealing with different cultures with different, mentalities, and that's actually a big fallback or fault for why SegWit 2x didn't happen. Like, we have developers who have various levels of degree of social prowess, right? Talking with different world cultures. Like, think of Gavin Anderson, right? Talking to Chinese like mining conglomerates. They have a completely different culture. Like for instance, when you deal with a Japanese businessman, like there's a protocol that you're supposed to follow for etiquette, and we have no concept of. The way that they do things socially is different. And I think that this is also kind of a part of that. We have a completely different culture announcing to the public something that we're not, like, in a way that we're not necessarily familiar with. Mm-hmm. So it makes the optics really difficult. They may not be acting maliciously,
right?
But it's still like it's a difficult pill to swallow when it's presented in a particular light. And I agree, they didn't really do themselves any favors with this announcement. It was unfortunate because it is kind of their onus to make this announcement, because obviously that announcement can't come from devs, right? Yeah. Like, if Amari would have come out and said, hey, by the way, like, we're going to propose this concept where we get money and we're going to be taking it from the miners, right? That's equally bad PR. Like, that's not going to work. So the miners do have to come out and say, hey, we're in support of this. But the reality is they're, the way they're presenting this is not necessarily how the rest of the world wants to consume it. Doesn't make their theory or their actions or their intent invalid. but it makes it complicated, and people don't like complicated.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, yeah, plop, here it is. Yeah. I was seeing somebody say in some chats that, yeah, the Chinese just, it's like, we're the boss and this is how it's going to be, right? And that's just, yeah, it's just a cultural difference, and maybe it wasn't translated correctly. Anyone know how they arrived at the figure of 6 million? It's 12.5% of the block reward, which comes out at BCH terms to 6 million in 6 months. And so, yeah, right now it's preparing to implement 6-month short-term donation plan. And so I thought something funny was this plan aims to provide sufficient funds for BCH developers to accelerate the BCH development fund before the upcoming bull run market in 2020 to 2021. So they're expecting a bull market, I guess. So which is kind of funny.
I'm hereby declaring bull market. Like, cool. Can you have done that earlier?
Yeah.
Like,
so yeah, I mean, one of the big criticisms is like, yeah, it's only gonna be 6 months, sure, right? So it's, I mean, that's one of the arguments is, that's how a lot of governments introduce taxes. It's like, you're not going, this is only going to be a short-term tax. Like, we're going to get rid of it, and then they just never do.
Yeah,
and so
it's the Patriot Act, right? Like, oh, sure, it's only for a couple years because we had this attack. Here it is, still 2020. We still have the damn thing. Like, it's really hard to give up power once you have it. And this is, I personally agree with the concern about this. Like, I don't know how I feel overall still, but I think that is a valid concern that this is setting a pretty dangerous precedent. And so say we solve this, for lack of a better term, like constitutional crisis of devs don't have funding, right? Like, we do this, like this 12.5% donation fund thing, wajig tax, whatever you want to call it. And cool, like, sure, that solves it for a little while, and then we end up having another crisis again in the future. Maybe Bitcoin Cash is not profitable because of a halvening or because of another person entering the market, or God knows what. And then what? Like, do we compromise? Like, do we fall back to this kind of like circling the wagon, centralizing power just to get over like this difficult hump? Like, it kind of sets a really dangerous precedent, and that's what I'm more concerned about than anything. Is what precedent are we really setting for the future? And like, short term, I don't think this is gonna destroy Bitcoin Cash. It's short term, it's not, but long term it might, by setting bad precedents. And I wish I had a glass, a seeing eyeglass or whatever they're called, But
then you'd be rich, so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe you are. I don't know. But anyways, so
maybe, yeah, sure.
This is like a very like hard thing to wrap my brain around. But they are claiming that since they are essentially pulling some of the SHA-256 rewards out of the ecosystem, is going to be 0.375% of the rewards being pulled out. Essentially, all of the SHA-256 miners are going to pay for this, because once this goes into effect, the difficulty is going to drop down a little bit, and I think the security is going to only go down by like 12%, right? Yeah, 12%. And let's see. And essentially, the conclusion is this cost will be split between BTC and BCH in the same ratio as the hash, 97-3. So mining will bear 97% of the cost of the diminished profitability, because there will be more hash competing for the same BTC rewards. So that's like a very, I mean, this is when you get into literal hash wars, I guess. It's between the different actual chains and not just the one chain. And a lot of people are arguing against this too, like that's not how it works. But it is kind of a stretch, I think personally, just because of the amount of variance in the markets. Just like that little percentage is like really not much. I mean, that's, but yeah.
So the math is very interesting, and again, this is where things are way more complicated than people like, and that's just because that's the world we live in. So I had a 2-hour conversation with Mark last night about all of this, and Lundeberg, and I'm convinced that their math is about right if we make some assumptions that are fair. And from that standpoint, like, I think one of the arguments that we have, right, is, oh, we're reducing the security of our network. But the reality is we're already, 3% of the 97, if that's the assumption.
Yeah.
The point, 4% isn't really protecting us for anything. You know what I mean? Like, it's not. And what's really protecting us is the same reason that this minority, not really minority, but the group of 4 miners can say, hey, this is something that we're going to do. And it's because they have extra hash power to come in when they need to.
Right.
And if they didn't find BCH's existence profitable and valuable, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
Like, that's the reality. If you don't want to accept that, that's fine. But that is, like, you're lying to yourself. They could completely do whatever they want because they have the power to, for hashing power. So from that standpoint, the math is complicated. If you are a dedicated like BCH miner, you're not really going to notice a difference once the oscillations stop, right? Like, once the transition happens, and this, like, if you're purely dedicating BCH, sure, you're giving up 12.5% of your reward, but the difficulty is going to be 12.5% less profitable, and therefore the market is going to respond that way, and 12.5% of the hash power is going to go to BTC. So you'll be mining about 12.5% more blocks or something along those lines. And it's not 12.5%, but some proportion of that. And therefore, it about evens out. Like, you're not going to really notice a difference from a profitability standpoint, which was my original concern, which is why I was talking with Mark. Like, if you're a minority miner and you aren't in favor of this, the reality is you don't really have much of a choice, which I don't necessarily agree with fundamentally. Yeah. But if this goes forwards, that's the reality. And what I was concerned with is it's going to consolidate hashing power. So, like, we're basically saying, if you're not one of the big 5 or the big 4 or whatever, then we don't value you and we want you to leave. But the reality is, I don't think that's actually what the effect is going to be. If you wanted to have like a conversation with Mark and how he's kind of convinced me that that's the reality, he would be the better person to go to. But I mean, this stuff really is complicated. It's not just a bunch of like throwing some numbers and proportions around and then having it make sense. Right. There's like a whole economics behind this, and it sucks. It's really complicated. and yeah, so it sounds like there's some due diligence, and this is like, this is the world that miners live in. This is actually, if anything, the only thing that they're most likely always going to be right about is what profitability looks like, because that's their whole world. So I kind of give them the benefit of the doubt from that standpoint. And if you kind of get into the more complex part of it, it seems like the math is right, and it does seem like it isn't the end of the world. The other problems are obviously the ones that we talked about already, not necessarily the profitability of things.
Yeah. So do you think this would help, like, with the unknown miners coming in and like making the turbo blocks, or do you think it'll kind of be the same?
There really is no incentive for them to stop doing that with this.
Yeah.
Because the reason they're doing that is because it's profitable. Ultimately, like, the profitability goes down by a static amount. It doesn't go down like I don't think it really discourages the switch mining. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Sure, it basically says, hey, if you're going to be doing this, then at least we get some benefit, which is the development funding. But it's still going to be profitable to switch back and forth and have these oscillations in hash power. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah. This was a hot take. This is the hottest take I've seen. So Eamon Gunzar says, first, it's coercive on miners. Practically, the orphaning is a way to force Calvin Irie to pay. There isn't a single person who cares about Calvin, probably not even his mother, assuming she's alive and has seen his pictures from the Caribbean.
I love internet trolls. That's spectacular.
Yeah, even so.
Yeah, it's entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it is kind of true though. Like, the math for that, it's actually getting the switch miners, the non-dedicated BCH miners. I mean, it's really getting everybody. If you are mining SHA-256 with an ASIC, I mean, you are in part actually like donating to the fund. So if people want to do that, if people want to not switch just out of spite, like maybe, because like you can't really predict that. Like people aren't always rational actors, like we saw that at the BSV hash war, right?
Right.
People aren't always going to do what's profitable, at least in the short term. So I don't know, maybe people get really spiteful, and maybe that will make it so that people don't oscillate between the two forks or the three forks, just out of spite. Whatever. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
This stuff's complicated, man.
It's funny when when I move coins to Coinbase, it's like I'm either waiting 20 minutes or 6 hours. It's like,
yeah, I hear you. I actually, it is kind of a pain in the butt. We did, so in combination with the 25 chain limit that we have, which I've already voiced my opinion, I think, needs change. That is my opinion. The 25 chaining limit is not a good idea. I don't care who disagrees with me. It's not. Like we encountered that actually.
Sorry, you think the limit is not a good idea, or what do you think isn't a good idea?
The current limit.
The current, okay.
The current limit of 25 needs to be changed.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need I actually don't even care how we change it. Like, as long as it doesn't go smaller. Like if we dynamically increase it, or if we statically increase it, or if we get rid of it, like any of those options from my standpoint are better than what we currently have. And that's because I personally have encountered that limit in a real like production like demo of like the Dublin's SLP token, where we were literally sitting in a room and we were like, cool, this isn't working, because we didn't even think that this 25 chain limit like whatever actually happening.
Right. Especially with the long block times, like it's like 2 hours in between a block is like probably happens at least once a day, like
100%. So yeah, it needs to get changed. But yeah, exactly. And to why I even brought that up is the block oscillations, make that crazy. Like when I sold my BSV, last week or something like that, I waited for like 2.5 hours for a block, and I'm just like, this can't be real. Like, this is so ridiculous. And whatever, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, the problem is if we change, I think I'm getting this correct. If we change that, we can't backport as easily from Bitcoin Core. Is that the issue? Or is it the exponential calculations, or is it both?
No, the performance stuff of it is resolvable, right? Okay. So yeah, a lot of this is code that we've inherited from Core, and by we I mean like ABC and BU. Bitcoin Verity doesn't have this concept. But the real risk has to do with so are you familiar with, so basically chains falling apart, long chains falling apart. Are you familiar with why we have a 100 block limit for Coinbase spending?
No, I guess I'm not.
So like if you are a miner and you mine a block and you get a Coinbase reward, you can't spend that the next block.
Yeah.
You have to wait 100 blocks to spend it. And the reason why is because we don't, like, if a block reorg happens, which can happen, that's a part of the, the protocol. If that happens, any transaction that is dependent upon that Coinbase, which grows very quickly, right? Like just sending 2 transactions, and then those 2 transactions have 2 transactions. Like you get a wide number of transactions that are dependent upon a single transaction very quickly, which is also why SLP transaction validation can be really complicated. That dependency graph grows very quickly. If you have a reorg that happened after 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 blocks, all of those transactions that were actually valid are becoming invalid, and they had no idea for why. And it's the same thing with why we have this 25 limit chain, where if we have a 25 depth limit, and that first one ends up being a double spend or isn't included in a block or something along those lines, we then have just massive amounts of transactions that were valid becoming invalid for no reason of their own. And it could provide a pretty sketchy user experience. But the reality is, if you have aren't having full blocks, then you don't have that problem, right? So why we still have it, I don't know. I don't know why we still have it. I think people might have some really good explanations, but I don't understand them.
Okay,
So
yeah. I mean, as far as I understood, it's just because it make it less easy to backport from core. But I don't.
that was a reason I'm pretty sure that got fixed, and
Okay.
also that's still not a real reason to
Right.
have a bad user experience. Like
Yeah.
we've
Yeah, of course.
implemented more complicated things.
Yeah.
So
Sure. Yeah.
yeah.
So speaking of that, so this is Amari's response that we were looking at earlier. The one thing
Mhm.
that was very concerning to many people and completely understand who controls the funds. And so this is obviously the elephant in the room, as he says.
Mhm.
But he goes into saying, I propose that the control of the key needs to be in the hands of people who have proven they work in the best interest of Bitcoin Cash, even in the rough times. And he says John Football, Mingerian, and himself. And
Mhm.
I mean, this is just like, this kind of breaks the whole miners choose, right? And goes right back into the
Yeah.
developers. So,
Yeah.
yeah, this part I wasn't quite sure about. I agreed with a lot of the rest. But then he said, I also like to invite a group of trusted community members such as Vin Armani, Josh Ethelthorpe, Chris Passier, and Mike Malley, who can advise on ways to spend the funds and can blow the whistle
Mhm.
if something fishy goes on. And so I get that, but again, if I think if we're still trying to like keep this symbiotic
Yeah.
relationship, I mean, this is kind of like these people are kind of users, but they are still more like devs. I mean, I don't Mike's more of a user than a dev, but um, yeah, it's just like interesting how he proposed this, I guess. And I mean, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm torn, right? I know like
Right.
every single person on that list, right?
Right.
I've
Yeah.
met
Me too.
almost all of them in person.
Me
Like, you
too.
know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so like you
And
can
I
only
love
be so
all of them.
objective.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's you know what I mean. It's like me being on the list, being like, "Oh, well, do you trust yourself, Josh?" Oh, I don't know. You know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
the reality is that we're what I think Amari's trying to get at is he's trying to make a broken system less broken,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't mean that it's not broken, right? So is
First of all, we don't
having
even know the system. We just know a Hong Kong company. So
right.
yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I mean by the system at that point, right? Like
Right.
this concept of having this shell corp in China, collecting these funds. Like there's realistically nothing preventing them from running away and then just being like, aha,
Okay.
like that's the reality.
We have breaking news. Roger finally tweeted about it. He says, "Easy. Having BTC miners pay 95% of the money to fund BCH protocol development. Hard. Figuring out who gets to spend the money and on what." So,
That's actually pretty succinct and kind of how I feel about it, right? The intent isn't bad, and the solution may not be bad from a technical standpoint. The things that are hard and the things that suck are where does the money go, which is this shell corp and everything. Are we being unfair to minority miners? And I think the answer is very likely yes.
mm-hmm.
Is implementing this as a hard or soft fork where like it becomes a part of the node rules, is that the right answer? I personally think it's not. Like there are lots of things here where this is a very complicated situation where if you like tweak any of these variables, my personal opinion of whether or not I'm for or against this is going to change. So I'm waiting for more information to coalesce. I'm waiting to form an opinion. I definitely think everybody else should be waiting, taking more time to think about this. Like everyone that I
Mm-hmm.
talked to in person, not in person, but through like video call yesterday, was like, this is really complicated. I have a lot of complicated emotions about this. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I want to like basically take the weekend and reflect, because this isn't just something to make a decision in 5 seconds and be done with it, because
Right.
it's not an easy question.
Yeah.
It's very philosophical. So
Yeah, but he said no debate, non-debate theory. You can't criticize it. So shut up.
I mean, that actually. So I read this, and this section, it didn't resonate with me. But the concept of non-debate theory, I mean, what he means is, something that people encounter all the time, where you can sit and think about something all day long,
Right.
and at some point you just have to pick one and go with it. And I think that level of frustration is something that I think he was trying to communicate that he's feeling, right? Like they've been having this conversation internally about how do we fund devs and what's the right answer and how should we like, should we experiment? How should we experiment? And I think at some point they were just like, we don't know, man. Like, we don't know what the right answer is. There's no way for us to know. So let's just do something instead of sitting there and being taking no action.
Mhm.
And I get that, like, frustration. Again, the optics on this are just garbage.
Yeah.
Like, they should have done this differently, but again, different cultures do things differently, and it's hard and complicated. And I think if we're going to be, this isn't the only time we're going to encounter this kind of problem. It's also not even the first. It's not the first time that we've encountered this kind of cultural problem and or difference. And it's certainly going to happen. I think we just need to realize that this is what being a part of a global community means.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Yeah, and people people have also been mentioning the Bitcoin.com like $200 million ecosystem fund. That was specifically for basically investors to invest in the fund, and then Bitcoin.com would distribute to the ecosystem. And I don't think like it included infrastructure, but with that much money, I would hope it would a little bit. But I think that was more for like venture capital type money to like invest in new companies. So yeah. I know a lot of people are bringing that up like, well, you just did this. Well, it's different. This is miners, not VC. And so one other thing I did actually have in my notes that is unrelated. You said Bitcoin Verde has a paid and unpaid part of. I think I worded that wrong.
I think I know what you were getting at. So we have. Is this like a reference to the video, or was this something I said today?
I think it was from the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the last interview, what I was describing is how we took open source software and made that profitable from a business model, right? And so Bitcoin Verde is free open source software. It's MIT licensed. You can do whatever you want with it as long as you say it came from us. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that, people are like, well, how do you make money on that, right? And I mean, like, open source software has existed for a very long time, and we basically took something that we had written and an MIT licensed, and we expanded on it to make a kind of enterprisey private implementation of it. And it has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It just took all of the complicated parts of what running a peer-to-peer distributed blockchain looks like, and like change some of the innards so that we can do like document storage of arbitrary size that's encrypted and auditable. So like that implementation that handles document storage is private and proprietary. For now, it's not going to be that way forever, but for now it is. And people are using it. Like, we actually have it in enterprises where they're using it. And that's what I'm talking about, is like there's a secret fork of Bitcoin Verde that exists to do document storage platform, like document storage things. When we make updates to, it's called DocChain, document chain, and real clever. And when we do updates to DocChain, most of the time they're compatible to the larger ports of Bitcoin Verde. Like the network code improvements, validation stuff, like those kinds of things all exist in a shared, sister or sibling environment, and vice versa is true. So we have an incentive to keep Bitcoin Verde up to date for lots of various reasons. One of them happens to be our kind of proprietary secret fork of Bitcoin Verde that does something completely unrelated to Bitcoin Cash. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I guess my last question is, do you hope to get some funding from this miner tax? It's just so easy. Don't know, man. It's just so easy to say tax. It's just so easy. I don't like the word, but it's just so easy.
You can
tribute. Tribute is another word. Tribute.
I volunteer as tribute. I don't know. I mean, like, I took some, like, actually, I had this internal debate when even the Bitcoin.com funding was happening, because everything that we've done on Bitcoin Verde was because, like, I have a personal passion for Bitcoin Cash. I happened to also be running a business, and I made them symbiotic, so I can still care about Bitcoin Cash while running a custom software organization, and they're mutually beneficial. So we don't necessarily need donations to exist. Like Software Verde exists because we write custom software for people.
Sure.
Sometimes that custom software happens to use open source software like Bitcoin Verde.
Gotcha.
Like, like that works. So we don't really necessarily need the funding. That being said, like we took funding for the BU spec because we wouldn't have written the Bitcoin Cash spec. Like we wouldn't have prioritized it for, last year if we weren't getting paid for it because we're a business.
Right.
So like if a miner throws, hundreds of thousands of dollars at us, we're going to be developing Bitcoin Verde full time. Like that's the reality. And so like if they want to do that, sure, we're developers for hire. If they don't, we're not going to evaporate. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, and here's the beginning of the spec.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the ferret litter box in the corner.
With the what? With the what?
We have a ferret. Oh, you have an office ferret.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
She runs around.
On top. Where is it? On top of the fridge?
Bottom left corner of the room.
Bottom left corner.
Right.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Office ferret. Nice.
So her name's Mako. If you're a Final Fantasy VII fan. But yeah, that's our office. That's Elliot and Andrew. John is, I think John might be taking the picture. I don't know where I am. My desk's in the middle. I think we took some flack for ordering Starbucks, whatever. But yeah, that's our office. It's in Ohio.
Nice.
We're not huge.
Nice.
We're like 6 people.
Nice.
So.
Nice. Cool. We got somebody in the chat saying Luke Jr. Luke has just announced he is donating $6 million to the devs, so the fund has been canceled. All right, thank you, Luke Jr.
All right.
The tax is canceled.
The taxes, yeah.
All right.
Oh, Luke.
All right, yeah. You have any more thoughts about anything we talked about today? Anything else you want to add about Ohio SLP, Bitcoin Verde, the Bitcoin tax, the Bitcoin tribute?
The tribute, right? I don't even know what I'd call it. I don't know. I mean, like I think I encourage people to keep an open mind to letting some of the situation actually kind of manifest and materialize. And if there are components to it that you don't agree with, then voice your opinion. Like that's the whole point of being a global community. Like we're not always going to agree, and it's really up to us to make a difference and to voice your opinion. And I encourage people to do that and try to stay informed. But I mean, it's hard, man.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard. This stuff's really complicated.
That's why you watch Calling It Like It Is.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, just, we'll see how it goes. This isn't the end of the world, no matter what happens. And, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully we'll come to a conclusion about our opinion at some point. So we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, definitely. I think with a little tweaking, a lot of people would be on board with it, but definitely needs a little more details at least. So, yeah. Thank you, Aaron, in the chat. So, thank you, Josh. Good luck on Bitcoin Verde. Hopefully, you get some tax money.
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Good seeing you.
And thank everybody for watching.